What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, a podcast dedicated to self-development, self-improvement, and helping you achieve the goals that you've laid forth in your life. If you don't know by now, my name's Brandon Davis. I'm the host of this podcast, and whether you're listening or watching on YouTube or various other streaming platforms, thanks for joining me here today. In today's episode of the podcast, I wanted to focus on conversations and networking. Something that a lot of young adults struggle with inside of our lives as we're trying to make a name for ourselves and get ourselves out there into the world. So with this conversation game and this networking game, I want to dive into a couple strategies as well as principles that I've lived in my life that I've seen success with as a young college student. So guys, with that all being said, let's jump into today's episode. First and foremost, I want to start with this topic in mind. A lot of times when people hear the word conversation or networking or building your social sphere, a lot of times my introvert friends, my friends that are all introverted, they absolutely hate that conversation. They hate doing the networking. They hate talking to people in general. If you're not in their close group, if you're not somebody they can trust, they don't want to talk to you, period. And so I want to throw this out there to begin with, that today's exercise, today's topic we're covering, I would argue is actually harder for extroverts, people like me who are super eager and outgoing and love to get to know new people. I think today's topic is actually harder for people like me, these extroverts, because oftentimes we get so excited to meet somebody or start a new topic or learn about somebody that we seem jumpy, we're all over the place, we just blab on and on and on. Whereas my introverts, you guys are so special because you actually sit there and listen to the conversations. You take a step back and you try and force the conversation on somebody else so you don't have to be the one talking about yourself, talking about others and whatnot. So keep that in mind. If you're more introverted, this may be a little bit of an easier practice inside of your life that you can get going on. And if you're extroverted, I hope you're up for the challenge because, man, this can be tough sometimes. But here's the overarching theme. If you've ever been in a situation where you're wanting to meet new people, maybe it's for dating game, maybe you're trying to get some new friends, or like I mentioned earlier, you're trying to network. You're putting yourself out there so you can get a better job in the future, maybe land an internship, some kind of role that you've been looking forward to for a while now. And with those different conversations and networking opportunities, oftentimes we as humans think I have to put myself out there and I have to shove down everything about me down this person's throat so they can get to know who I am. Especially in the form of networking. If you're going to an event, say your local college is doing an event where you can meet businesses that you can maybe get a summer internship with, or you're networking in some other fashion. Either way, a lot of times we'll think, okay, how can I make myself stand out from these other participants who may have the same grades as me, extracurriculars, maybe they're just as smart, if not smarter than I am? How can we make ourselves stand out against all of our competition? Once again, this is specifically for the networking example that I'm offering. So, how can we make ourselves stand out from the others? It's very simple. Don't talk about yourself at all. Now, this might seem very backwards, but as you'll see through both the networking opportunities as well as conversations when you're first getting to know somebody, even if it's been somebody who's been your friend for quite some time now, when you don't talk about yourself, magical things happen. So that's what I want to dive into next. As you're going forward in life, I'm sure at some points you've either been this person or you've definitely known this person. If you ask somebody a question, for instance, hey, what's your name? My name is Brandon. What's your name? Immediately you should reply. I think that one's a given. But I'm sure you've known that person, or once again, you've been that person who says, where are you from? And in my case, I'm from Hemet, California. And then you immediately blurt in, oh my gosh, Hemet, California, that's such a beautiful place. There's lots of orange trees and it's close to the mountains and the beach. And oh my gosh, you're just in the center of everything in Southern California. And you go on and on. Even though you're talking about Hemet, California, the place that whoever you're talking to is from, or insert wherever somebody you've been talking to recently is from. It could be different parts throughout the world. But imagine somebody tells you where they're from and you immediately hijack the conversation by inserting everything that you love about that place, you know about that place, you do about that place, etc., etc. Who is the conversation now focused on? It's not focused on them anymore. You may be talking about their hometown, but you're the one doing the talking. They may agree with you for all those points. Like I said, Hemet's a beautiful place. We're close to a lot of things. We're in the heart of everything for Southern California. But if I am actually going to be caring about my conversation with this new person that I met, or this potential networking opportunity, or a friend that I've had for quite some time, it's sometimes best to shut up and let them do the talking. So, for instance, once again, imagine I was talking to somebody named Jane. I said, "Jane, where are you from?" And she responds, "I'm from Los Angeles, California." "Perfect, Jane. That sounds really cool. Tell me a little bit about Los Angeles." As Jane goes on, she might tell you about some of the cultural differences. She might tell you about the sporting events that go on, maybe the food, the beaches, the amazing things that come up with Los Angeles. But with that in mind, who's doing the talking at that point? It's no longer you, it's Jane. She's the one who's carrying on the conversation. It's subconsciously, she may not notice this right at first, but subconsciously she'll recognize that you actually care about what she's saying in the conversation. Once again, jumping back to that person who seems to be doing all of the talking in your conversations that you've had in the past, how does that make you feel? Do you feel like they're actually listening to you, or are they just trying to get their 2 cents in? Think about a conversation you've had in the past week. When somebody has asked you a question, then immediately blurted in themselves and began to discuss every issue that they've had inside of their lives or anything else that might be going on. How does that make you feel? Do you feel like they're actually listening to you? Do you feel like they could care less about what you're saying? Or are they just trying to express everything that they have going on inside of their lives? And once again, I guarantee we've all been there. We've all done it. But what I'm trying to get at today is changing that so we can actually have meaningful conversations that not only show that we care about somebody, but we're interested in getting to know them. So jumping back, I want to talk about networking more specifically in this example. Many people would disagree with me that networking is a time where you should be talking about yourself. You should be showing all your examples, all your traits, everything that you do correctly inside of the specific job or internship that you might potentially be getting. But in that same instance, can you imagine how you can set yourself aside from all the other competition? Once again, don't say anything about you. Let the person who you're trying to network with, maybe if it's the CEO or one of his recruiters or whoever it may be, let them lead the conversation. Once again, it goes into, if they ask you a question, don't be rude, answer it, but always deflect and plow the conversation back onto the person who you're originally trying to connect with. It is going to be so hard, for my extroverts especially, even for my introverts though. It's going to be so hard because what do we as humans want to do? Innately, we want to talk about ourselves. One of my favorite Toby Keith songs, right? I want to talk about me, I want to talk about I want to talk about number one. Right? Us as humans, we want to talk about ourselves. But it is so difficult to actually show somebody that you're wanting to do a meaningful conversation by simply talking about yourself. Even if you're going back and forth and you're answering questions about yourself and then them and then back and forth and back and forth. What one is going to show that you're listening more than if you actually just sit there and talk about them the entire conversation? I don't care if the conversation is 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. However long that conversation is, I want you to try as hard as you can to keep the conversation completely steered towards whoever you're talking with. Once again, this could be a best friend. This can be somebody you just met. It could be somebody you're trying to network with, a new boss, whoever it may be inside of your life. Take on this challenge. You're going to be amazed about how much stuff you can learn about somebody right off the get-go, but also how good you feel about just listening to somebody. And also, if you pay close attention to their body expressions, their emotions, what's their face telling you, are they more opened up or are they closed off, you're going to start noticing how amazing they feel specifically when you're the one listening and responding directly towards them. In the same effort, imagine, like I said, we've already been going through some scenarios that you may have had previously inside of the past week, but imagine a conversation you had recently where somebody really focused on you. What was going on inside of your life, what was happening, all the trials, the positives, the negatives, everything in between. How did you feel after that conversation? I bet you felt really great because they were focusing on you. And once again, as humans, we always want to be talking about ourselves. So my challenge for you, all of my listeners on the Get Over Yourself podcast, is turn the conversations, turn these day-to-day conversations, these networking opportunities, everything in between, change it towards somebody else. Change it towards the person you're talking to. Guys, I promise you, I live by this. It is magical, the results you will see. Once again, jumping back towards the networking opportunity. You're in that conversation. You want to make yourself stand out amongst the competition. So how do you do that? You talk only about the recruiter or the person you're networking with. You talk specifically about their life, their family, their dogs, their other pets, their sports interess, what they like to do on the weekend. Ask them question after question, and you will be shocked about how amazing it works. I guarantee that person you're walking away from, if you're trying to land that internship, they're going to think at the end of the day, wow, that person is really cool. They're not even going to realize technically that you have been asking them questions about them, and they didn't really learn anything about you. But because you took the time to listen, something's going to stand out differently inside of you than every other one of your competitors. That same principle stands for networking. It stands for everyday conversations. People will walk away from that conversation that you just had purely focused on them, thinking, wow, that person, and they're speaking about you, that person is the coolest person I've ever met. And I promise you this much too. Not only are they going to say that, but they're going to remember your name and you're going to remember theirs. That's another thing I guess we could talk about for a second is how often have you had conversations? You've spoken to somebody for maybe it's very brief, just a couple minutes, or even if it's a longer period of time, an hour, a couple hours. How long have you been talking to somebody where they, at first, you do the pleasantries, you say your name, where you're from, etc. If you're working a job, what you do for work, maybe. But then after a minute, you get talking and talking. How quickly do you forget their name, and how quickly do they forget your name? I promise you, if you apply this strategy into your life, they're going to remember your name, and you're going to remember theirs. And what overarching principle do we learn if you remember somebody's name? You learn how much you actually care and love somebody. Guys, this should not be something you're faking whatsoever. When you're having true, authentic conversations, you should be focused on the person who's speaking, and you should be answering their questions and keeping the conversation drilled towards them, but also do it in a way that's loving and caring. Nobody wants to go through an interrogation. If you can imagine, I'm talking to you at this point. Well, let's bring up the example name of Jane again. Jane, where are you from? How many pets do you have? How many siblings do you have? Are you married? Are you divorced? What do you like to do for fun on the weekends? Of course nobody's going to like that conversation. It sounds like you're interrogating them. It sounds horrible. It sounds like somebody's trying to figure out your entire life story for some weird reason. But if you do it more in a manner of, Jane, where are you from? Oh, that sounds great. Are you the youngest child? Oh, you're in the middle. Very cool, very cool. I bet lots of perks come from that. Yeah, absolutely. No, you actually invest into somebody. Show them you care. Show them you love them, no matter who it is. I don't care if it's somebody you just met or if it's somebody you've known forever. If you put this time into investing into somebody else, I promise you, once again, they will show you respect, love, and compassion going back straight towards you. And now, going back to the networking opportunity, they're going to remember your name. They're going to remember that name of Brandon, of Jane, of Jimmy, of whoever else is listening to this podcast right now. They're going to remember your name. Once again, it is very tough to do this. We're going to want to steer the conversations in a way that it goes back to us, or at least in a way that it doesn't feel like we're interrogating someone. But if you practice this, if you express yourself in a manner that you only want to be speaking to somebody else to get to know and love them, I promise you the results will show. So guys, that's what I wanted to talk about today on the Get Over Yourself podcast. I promise you, if you apply this inside of your life, it is going to change everything. You're going to have so many people caring over you, even though you're not even doing a word of talking about yourself. Likewise, you're going to go land that job, you're going to get that internship, you're going to make those new friends, you're going to land that date, whatever it may be, it's going to come. I promise you. Take on this challenge. Try it over the next week. Next time you sit down with somebody for lunch, or you're talking with a parent or somebody brand new you meet in the elevator, try it. See how far into the conversation you can get before you mention something about yourself. It's very difficult. I don't expect you to be great at it right off the bat. I'm certainly working on it. But try it and see how far you can get. That's my challenge for you guys this week. If you found anything impactful into today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, feel free to leave us a positive review. It means the world. That's how I actually get to branch out my podcast to new listeners. Likewise, if you know somebody who needs to hear what I said in today's episode, I would appreciate it if you go ahead and forward this on to them so we can get their conversations changing in the right direction. Guys, as always, feel free to message me on Instagram or on my email. All those will be linked in the description down below. But with that being said, just remember, it'll all be okay. Just take a step back and keep changing your conversations and steer them towards the listener and not yourself.